At 25, career change feels exciting. At 50, it feels terrifying.
I've been doing the same job for about 18, 19 years.
Yeah.
And I'm like, I'm getting towards, an age where people don't normally switch jobs unless they're forced out the door.
It's not normal to change work after 50 because people fear they'd have to start over, or that it's risky, or that employers won't value their decades of experience. But what if those fears were just distracting you from a far greater gain?
I'm reaching my, into my 50s now. What did I want to do, right? With the last 10 years, what do I want to do next? What's going to fulfill me? And it just kind of keeps building momentum.
What if the experience you've accumulated at this stage in life meant that it was actually the best possible time to make a change that benefits you?
I was just like, this is what I'm looking for in a position, in a company culture.
I absolutely love the team I'm working on.
Career change after 50 doesn't have to mean starting over from zero. It also doesn't have to be risky. In this episode of the Happen to Your Career podcast, we're going to cover why some of the most successful career transitions happen after 50 years old. I'm going to share 3 different stories that challenge everything you think you know about career change later in life. You'll hear from Scott, who left pharmaceutical sales after 18 years in his early 50s. Carolyn, an engineer with 35 years of experience, who left engineering entirely before finding her way back to what she truly loved. And Bob, he stepped away from a 24-year career leading restaurants to experiment with consulting. Each took a very different approach. One made a strategic industry shift, another returned to her core passion within the same field. The third turned his expertise into a portfolio of opportunities. Their stories are going to help you answer something that I get asked about all the time. If you're miserable at work, but have decades invested in your career, should you completely change directions? Or is there a way to shift what you're doing while leveraging what you've already built?
I was just like, hey, I've been doing the same job for about 18, 19 years.
Yeah.
And I'm like, I'm getting towards, an age where people don't normally switch jobs unless they're forced out the door. And so he was a great help in that and always redirecting my mind, my set on that. And I think that was one of the, most important things of part of, being part of the process. Is having a coach, is having, someone like him, because you could easily get frustrated doing the legwork yourself and then be like, I'm too old to do this. I might as well just stick it out.
So this is exactly the mental trap that catches so many people after 50. The assumption that age automatically limits your options. But here's what Scott discovered about the reactions he got when he announced his decision to change careers.
Usually people typically in their early 50s are like, they're going to stick it out. And I told all my friends that I was doing this and reaching out to people, and they're like, you're crazy.
Sound familiar? The people around us often become our biggest obstacle to change. Not because they're trying to hurt us, but because they're projecting their own fears, their own concerns, often coming from a place of care. But that limits our situation. Because the reality is we've got people left and right who are in their 50s and 60s and 70s that are not completely happy with where they're at and feel like they're sort of stuck. Often the reality is you might be surrounded by other people in their 50s or 60s or 70s, and they might have good advice, but that advice is also filled with their own views and own ways of looking at it. And they often can't see outside that. And that's where looking at experiences like Scott's, it reveals something crucial about how we think about career change after decades in one field.
I think that stigma is still out there where, like, when I left my accounting job, the company was to work at that company at that time was a very sought after job. And most people that started in there, they started and they put their 30 years in, and then they were done and they walked out the door. And I wasn't like that. I think a lot of people were like thinking I was crazy because I left, and I totally did a 180 and changed industries. Something totally different than my career. So and then, I started this, and the same thing happened after, putting 18 years into, this company, my previous company, and telling people I left. They thought I was kidding when I was saying I was leaving and starting. And, it was interesting because most of the responses I got were people were making excuses for why they were staying in the role they were staying, which indicated to me that they were unhappy with what they're doing, but unwilling to make that change. And so that it does take a lot of effort to do that. There's no doubt about that.
When everyone was projecting to Scott that a career change at his age was crazy and just a wild idea, how did he get the courage to go against the societal norm? What finally pushed Scott over the edge to actually make the change?
I think I just got finally sick and tired of dragging my feet. And there wasn't really a point in time, a specific moment. I think I just was like, I got to do this. It's either now or never to do this. And whatever happens, and, and we'll go from there. But I at least wanted to go down, trying to do that. I think many of us out there who are not happy with our jobs, and it's so much easier just to continue doing what we're doing versus this is the big scary thing. And it takes a lot of effort, but it's also very scary because there's a lot of change that goes on, whether you're staying in the same industry or you're totally switching.
It wasn't a dramatic moment at all. It was the cumulative weight of knowing that something had to change. So where then did Scott's career change take him after? I'm going to let him tell you.
I kind of had to set my ego aside a little bit and reach out to people and, ask them what they did, doing these like informal interviews. And I felt like a little bit like, gosh, I've been in this industry and I'm doing this and I'm going to change now. And Philip was like, who cares? Just, get out there and get as much information. And after I did it 1-2 times, I started to do it like crazy. And people at the gym be like, hey, can I buy you a cup of coffee? And, just kind of curious. I'm in the middle of looking, a career transition, just kind of curious what you do. And people were surprisingly really willing to do that and take 5-10 minutes out of their time, whether it was a virtual coffee or a lot of people really were just like, yeah, let's meet up at, Starbucks and, we could talk at this time. And by letting people know and talking to people about what I was doing, led me to where I'm at now, because it was someone that knew someone that was hiring for this role. It's still in the medical industry. It's just a totally different therapeutic area and a lot smaller company, a lot less red tape, and people know you. And so I was basically just doing an interview and just kind of practicing and just kind of getting to know the company a little bit and to know the position. And one interview led to the next, And, I was texting Philip along the way. I was like, this is getting more serious as we go on. And I think my ability to just be curious about the position led me to, and obviously my skill set that, sometimes I feel like doesn't, have a lot of weight, had a lot of weight with this particular spot. And so I was awarded this spot where, there was people with many, many, many more years of experience than what I had to give them in this certain area. that didn't get awarded the position. I think what it was is, in one of the exercises, I don't remember which one it was, so I apologize, but we're writing down exactly what I want, almost like it was like the ideal career day.
Yeah.
There was bits and pieces that came out of that. And I think they were kind of shocked that, this is what I'm looking for, and not like I was this person begging for the job or answering all the questions the way that they wanted. I was just like, this is what I'm looking for in a position, in a company culture. And I honestly think that was what sealed it for me.
Okay, let's look at Scott's strategic shift within healthcare sales and how that compares to Carolyn's experience. After 35 years as a mechanical engineer, she was ready to leave engineering entirely. She had also eventually along the way moved into engineering leadership. But this most recent set of experiences had her burned out completely. And she was considering much more of an absolute complete break than what Scott was considering. But her story took an unexpected turn. Here she is talking about questioning herself during her change.
I was doubting everything about myself. I failed in that role. I believed that was going to be a great opportunity for me and that I was going to be able to make all these changes and implement stuff that I really believed in, that I felt strongly in, and I failed. And so what am I doing? There's definitely something wrong here. And what can I do going forward? Because it's not this, is how I felt. I really did believe that it was me, that it wasn't the wrong fit or anything like that. I thought it was just me not being capable of doing this job.
Carolyn's burnout in a leadership role had convinced her that she needed to abandon engineering completely. By the way, this is the norm. Often when we are burnt out by something or been in it for a long time, we think we have to just throw it all out and start over. And it's usually not the right decision. She was so done with her field, though, that she couldn't imagine even staying in it. But through the process of examining what had worked in the past, what she loved, her strengths, she made a crucial discovery.
Analyzing what my strengths are, going through the exercise and filling out, I think I did multiple different assessments to determine what my strengths are. And understanding what those are made me realize, okay, I was not in the wrong field after all. Engineering actually does. I know it really does. And there were times in my career. So I reflected, because you basically write down all of your jobs and what was it about that job that energized you. And that exercise really brought it home for me that, there were times in my career that I absolutely loved what I was doing. And I was energized by the type of work it was, and it was satisfying.
Yes, of course, you learned that the problem wasn't engineering. It was actually the management pieces. She didn't enjoy that. More specifically, it was being in a role that took her away from her strengths and all the parts and pieces of engineering that did energize her. This realization led to a very specific distinction for Carolyn. And many people miss this.
I like to mentor people. Not the same as managing people.
Two different activities.
They really are.
Potentially, completely. They can overlap, but they don't need to.
And they were overlapping, but I didn't realize that it was the mentoring that actually brought me some happiness. Passing on this knowledge to the younger or less experienced engineers was something that really did give me a sense of happiness, or, just joy, whatever you want to call it. And I've gotten compliments from the people that I have mentored that, I was very effective for them. I taught them a lot. They learned a lot from me. It was something that definitely we both got something out of. But once I stepped into straight up management, that's not what I was doing. So it gave me some perspective on what are the things that really would make me happy in a job.
This distinction between mentoring and managing became the key to Carolyn's solution. Your solution is going to be different, by the way, but in her case, she didn't need to leave engineering. She needed to find an engineering role that emphasized mentoring and hands-on technical work rather than traditional management. And this led her to her current position, which, listen to how she describes this.
I absolutely love the team I'm working on. I'm not the leader of the team. There's someone else who's worked there for a long time and kind of worked his way up from the bottom. He really has a lot of people skills, and I enjoy working with him, and he leads us, but he's not like my manager. So we have this great rapport, I guess. And there's one other person. We're a very small group. So three people in the engineering group. I'm the only degreed engineer, but that's not what matters to me. They have their own strengths that they bring to it.
So yes, Carolyn stayed in engineering, but everything about how she works changed. She found a small team environment with a collaborative leadership where she could focus on the technical work and the mentoring without the traditional management responsibilities or those things that she didn't really want. She even has a 4-day work week now, which is something that energizes her even more. Let's look at Bob Kalish's approach, the portfolio career. After 24 years as a restaurant chef, Bob didn't make one dramatic change. Instead, he began experimenting with building multiple streams of opportunity. Here's what he had to say about making a change after 50 years old.
Every second counts, right?
Mm-hmm.
And if you pause for a second, guess what? That counted, right? And, it's a combination of that. And when you look at a timeline of your career, let alone your life, but let's just say your career, what do you want to do with, as I'm reaching my, into my 50s now, what did I want to do, right? With the last 10 years, what do I want to do next? What's going to fulfill me? And it just kind of keeps building momentum and building momentum. I'm not looking for my legacy part of my career, but that's what I find myself in. Not about me, but can I leave it better than what I got it, right? And for the most part, I would say we're going to try, and hopefully we can influence one or two people, and I think that would be a win. One or two people. If everybody could influence one or two people in a way to make it better, you're winning. And one of my biggest influence in my life is my wife. And I remember her saying to me at one point, hey, and this was, we were in our 40s. Like she said, hey, let's think about where we want to retire to. And I was tired and, that's so far away. Right. And so the response I gave, I don't know, what do you think? In the mountains, the beach? And she goes, no, what country? And I was like, oh my God, I'm going to have to think about this. But she's that person in my life that, makes me think of the bigger picture. So, that's I've always looked at my life as kind of a timeline that you don't know when it ends, right? So you gotta, I know at some point I want to retire. At some point, when I first came on, my goal was simple, Scott. When I first came on and signed on, I wanted to just get that last patch of my career to retirement. If I had to drag it across the line on my back, that's what I was going to do. And one of your coaches changed my mindset so quick. And she said, well, what if you were doing the things you love to do with the people you love doing it with? Why would you want to retire? And I was like, oh boy, much like my wife saying, what country?
Yep.
I felt like, you know what? I probably wouldn't want to retire if I was having fun with the people I wanted to have fun with, doing the things I wanted to do. So all of a sudden, my mind started opening up again.
This is a completely different approach in what we might call the portfolio career. Rather than making one dramatic pivot, Bob began experimenting with multiple ways to apply his restaurant expertise. And this experimentation mindset led him to explore how consulting could allow him to contribute his knowledge while working in an entirely new way.
And working with Megan a ton on this stuff of just sifting through what about this, what about that kind of conversations and throwing breadcrumbs down, right? And me picking them up and running with the ball. I got to a point where that giving back piece was super important to me. I looked at things. I have life experiences. I have work experiences. And how do I give them back in a way that's different than what I was doing? Okay. How can I help organizations? How can I help people? And consulting came up, and I was like, that might be a great opportunity for me to look at things in a different light.
Bob's approach involved extensive experimentation, what we call career experiments. He started having conversations with people across the restaurant and food industry. And during these conversations, Bob's goal was to get a feel for how a consulting chef worked. And if it seemed like something that would make him happy, if it would fill him up or fit his strengths or align with those parts and pieces that he knew he wanted in his next step.
As you go through process, you just start trying to think of everything possible that you could possibly do and then scratch them off the list.
Yeah.
Right. And for one reason or another, by doing that, the cream starts rising to the top, and getting rid of the no's to get to the yes is kind of the mentality behind it. And working with Megan a ton on this stuff of just sifting through what about this, what about that kind of conversations and throwing breadcrumbs down, right? And me picking them up and running with the ball. I got to a point where that giving back piece was super important to me. I looked at things. I have life experiences. I have work experiences. And how do I give them back in a way that's different than what I was doing? Okay. How can I help organizations? How can I help people? And consulting came up, and I was like, that might be a great opportunity for me to look at things in a different light. I think what I liked about it was not being emotionally attached to one thing for too long. And go in there, get the job done, move on to the next thing. There's a certain freedom about that in my mind that I enjoyed. I thought if while I was consulting, I could make a positive influence in the dynamics in a kitchen, if I could get the conversation going, which I previously mentioned, I maybe wasn't as good of a communicator as I needed to be, an advocate for myself, if you will. If I could remove frustrations from the team, then maybe, that might be something that would actually fulfill me. And one case at a time, one job at a time. And so I kicked around the idea quite a bit, and it rides right alongside the coaching piece, right? They're kind of hand in hand, the way I see, the way I envision it.
Okay, so here's the key insight from Bob's experience. Career change after 50 doesn't have to mean picking one path and hoping it works. It actually doesn't have to mean anything that you think it means. Often you can experiment, you can build multiple relationships, you could create a portfolio of opportunities that all leverage your existing experience in different ways. Or you can do something else that fits. But here's what all three of these stories have in common. They required confronting the unique challenges of career change after 50. Scott faced the time management challenge that many people with decades of experience face.
For me, it was, I'll be honest, was the time management of it. Because I was working quite a few hours at work, obviously, family obligations.
Mhm.
So I sat down with Philip and we did this schedule. I thought I had to spend these huge blocks of time in order to get stuff done versus getting up, a half hour early in the morning and, doing 45 minutes before I went to work. And then squeezing time in the evening time and doing 45 minutes then versus, I need to, spend 2.5 hours every day at night.
Okay, this is crucial. You don't need massive blocks of time to work on your career change. When you're in your 50s, chances are high that you're busy or you're involved with a number of different things. You've built an entire life and you've got things to do, but luckily, small, consistent efforts compound over time. Scott also had to get his family on board.
I mean, my wife and I sat down each week together. Yeah. We had a specified time that we sat down, and I basically shared her what I needed to do. I mean, she was part of this process, so she knew each step of the way. But each week I would show her, be like, I need to get this done. It's going to take approximately this amount of time. And we would basically plan out our schedule for the week.
These weekly planning sessions with his spouse ensured that career change didn't become a source of family stress, but rather a shared project. This level of intentional communication is often what separates successful career change from those who get stuck along the way. Now, maybe the most important insight for anyone considering a career change after 50 comes from what Carolyn discovered. Many people believe they need to completely change fields. Then what they actually need is to simply shift how they work within their field, really figuring out what an ideal role means for you. Carolyn puts it perfectly.
I found getting back to actual engineering was what I wanted to do. So recentering myself in engineering and not necessarily the leadership side of it. And that's what I did so that I could really leverage the strengths that I have that, historically had brought me happiness. So, and that it's okay to step back. You don't have to just keep advancing and going on that career ladder that's basically pushing you into something that maybe you never really wanted.
In a culture obsessed with climbing the ladder, it's easy to get stuck on that same ladder. But sometimes the best career move is a lateral shift or even a step back. What really actually matters is not what direction you're moving. What matters is, does what you're moving to align better with the life that you're trying to build, your strengths, your interests, and what you value the most? All three of our guests had to overcome what I call the skills transfer myth. And that's the belief that your skills, your experiences from one industry or occupation or company, it just won't transfer elsewhere. Scott discovered, of course, that this wasn't true.
I loved hearing those affirmations from Philip, that slowly helped me change my mind. And there was different modules through the course too that, where you write out your skill sets. And I thought, wait a second, these skills can be transferred anywhere.
It's crazy.
It's absolutely crazy. I'm like, I thought I was like a one-trick pony. I'm like, I have a lot of skills that could be utilized, with a finance background and in a sales background and help building sales teams. I was like, I could do a lot of different things that were out there.
As you might have guessed, this realization opened up possibilities that Scott never knew existed. The truth is, most of your skills are transferable. Usually, whatever percentage of your skills that you think are transferable is much, much higher than what you think. That's the consistent theme I've seen. You just need to reframe how you're thinking about them and maybe even get help presenting them a different way. So how do you decide whether to make a complete career change or find ways to shift within your current field or industry? Here's a couple of questions to ask yourself. First, is it the work itself that's the problem? Or is it the environment, the culture, or the way you're being asked to do the work? Carolyn thought she hated engineering when she actually hated the management pieces. Second, When you look back at your career, what moments energized you the most? Those moments usually contain clues about what elements to preserve and which ones to build upon. Third, there are aspects of your current expertise that you could apply in new ways or in different contexts. Bob took his restaurant experience and created consulting and those types of opportunities. And finally, what experiments can you run while you're still in your current role? That way you can test out different possibilities. You don't have to quit your job to start exploring other alternatives. Now, the great thing about career change after 50 is that you have something younger career changers don't. Deep expertise, often established networks, financial stability that allows for more strategic rather than desperate decision making. Your decades of experience aren't a limitation. They're a competitive advantage. And the question here isn't whether or not you can afford to make a change at this stage. The question is whether you can afford not to. If you want help with this, it's what we do every single day. It's what we love to do. Just drop me an email, scott@happentoyourcareer.com. Put conversation in the subject line. I'll connect you with the right person on my team. They'll have a conversation with you, and we'll figure out the very best way that we can help. Again, that's scott@happentoyourcareer.com.